Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Smite League Season 5 RSL Draft. We're going to start off quickly with determining the pick order here. And if you watch the SDL Draft, you already know what's going to go down here. But I'm joined by the wonderful, the lovely Cryptic. Cryptic, how are you feeling today?
I'm fine, thanks, Muff. Thank you for asking. I'm very excited for the season five draft after the finals for RSL. I think everybody's just been waiting for this. All Stars is a bit of a crescendo towards this event, and I think we're all ready.
I happen to agree with you, so let's not waste any more time. Let's just get straight into it with the first pick of the RSL draft. It's going to go directly to... Oh, looks like we're going to give it to Action Days. Honestly, pretty good start off. So in case you didn't know, if they have those little brackets, it means that someone else will be drafting for them. They'll be in the thing, but it is still their team. So up next, a fan favorite and my co-commentator from earlier, we have Eon joining us with the second pick of the RSL draft.
Yeah, I
And
think Action Days had the first pick of the season four draft as well, so it's interesting to see what he does with it this time around.
I think you're right. And oh, coming up next, we got my boy Pete coming up with the next pick here. And how are you feeling about these big three so far?
I think Action Days put a team together last season, which was it struggled a little bit. Shall we be honest there? But having that first pick in the draft should allow him to go out there get a big um, powerhouse player and hopefully sets right some of those wrongs from last season. Eon, obviously part of casual mains. I'm very excited to see what he tries to do. And Pete returning after his brief hiatus in season four. I'm excited to see what he can do with the team. I'm expecting it to be the kindest team in the history of the RSL and the nicest team. So I'm excited to see what he manages to do with it.
And I'm excited to see what all these captains have to offer us. Like I accidentally made it a little too big, so we're gonna skim it down a little bit there. Mark's got a long name. Um, but yeah, coming in next, we got Mark up with the fourth pick. Honestly, with this draft, the pick order isn't super important, as you know, it's a money draft still. But there are definitely strategies that become more viable when you're in the middle or towards the back of the draft. So we'll have to see how these captains start to play out. Who they are going to draft, if there's any difference in what they plan on doing based on the picks here.
Yeah, last time we saw some really differing approaches, didn't we? We saw some people spend very big early. We saw some people hold all of their money until the last couple of rounds and then get whoever they wanted it. I'm going to use discounted prices. That is no disrespect to the players. People just spend a lot of money early, and you saw some of the captains, especially those at the top end of the standings last season, picking the players that they want at the end and just outbidding everybody else.
I agree with you. I mean, 100%. I agree with you. That's what we saw. We saw some of our all stars. We saw Eon last season, who ended up winning MVP, go for under 150, which is just insane to me. And we might even see a lot of that stuff this season. We saw a lot of it in the SDL draft. Um, so we might just see it again in this upcoming RSL season.
That's always going to be the case with drafts, though, isn't it? People get really high draft stock just before the draft. We saw it happen last season, going into season four. Some people playing in houses were probably a little bit overvalued. I think, being honest, I was one of them. After coming out of those RSL showcase games, and so go for a lot of money right at the beginning of the draft. Meaning some of the even veteran players can drop a little bit further down the draft boards, but that doesn't diminish their value. If anything, it makes them better. They end up getting, you know, top level RSL talent for mid level prices, shall we say?
All right. Well, that right there, we've got our 9 here. So that'll conclude this portion of the draft. We're gonna go into a short intermission while we wait for Rosie to get the captains prepared and all that, and we will be back with you guys shortly. All right, everybody, and welcome back. I'm still joined by the wonderful, the fabulous Cryptic, and we're gonna get straight into this RSL draft. Now, Cryptic, we talked a little bit earlier, but how are you feeling right now about this? Now that we got the draft order settled, we're about to start getting into this draft. How are you feeling right now?
I'm really excited about how these captains are going to approach it. That strategy you were talking about earlier on, looking at who really values who. We know some people are friends with other people in the league, and as a result, that maybe adds value on one team that just isn't there on others. Some people play very well when they're paired together. And I think with all the recent influx of talent we've had to the RSL, I don't think all the players are even known yet. And I think it's going to be interesting to see who comes out to be a very good low value pick and maybe who gets overvalued a little bit.
I mean, I 100% agree here. There's a lot of RSL players in this list, so I think there's going to be some crazy steals, far more than the SDL had. I think the biggest steal of the SDL was obviously TKLs for 50, or TKLs
Yeah.
for 100. But when it comes to the RSL, I think we're going to see a lot of crazy steals, and a lot more of them, just because of how it went last season. Kind of some of the draft boards I've seen so far. So we'll just have to see how that goes.
Yeah, I'm getting a really blind look into this because I really don't know anybody's draft boards. I haven't really spoken to many captains in the run up to this. And so I'm really excited to just see what people do, how they approach
Mhm.
everything. I think it's gonna be brilliant.
Unlike last season, I'm kind of in the same boat. I know very few captains draft boards, and we're gonna see him start off with Rogue. So he's already gonna be at 100, starting off with the first pick. This is a little surprising to me. When we saw the SDL, we saw the guns start going out. They were blazing. They were shooting fast. We saw players going for tons of money quick, but they're being a little bit more conservative here, on this draft.
Yeah, I think very much possibly some lessons learned from last time around the first round, season 4 being the first time we ran this draft style. I think people are going to be a lot more conservative with their money
Mhm.
early on unless somebody is so determined to get a player
Yeah.
that they've played with before. And looking at somebody, some of the players here we've got, they play in a lot of leagues. They're very well known, and they'll be used to playing with each other. So certainly that is a possibility.
As I say that, we're starting to see some money get thrown here. Rogue's looking to
Yeah.
start off pretty strong as he's already at 600. What do you think? Oh man, he's already at 750. He's going in here really strong. Do you think Dummy is particularly just trying to drive Skipper up on this price?
I think it's very possible. I know Rogue somewhat, and he's a very very talented player. And I can certainly see them going for this kind of value. But when it just comes down to two people bidding at the end, it tends to be one running up the price and the other one not. And I think Skipper there may have been taken for a little bit of a ride on this one, paying a little bit more than he'd expected to, just because Dummy had realized how desperately Skipper wanted him on his team.
Yeah, and I mean Skipper right there is just throwing out 100, 100, 100, 100 right
Hmm.
on top of every single one of a Dummy's bids there. So I'm genuinely not surprised, especially with a little bit of insider information I have here. Is I know that Dummy was heavily considering playing mid. I'm not 100% sure that Rogue's main role is mid. I know he can flex a ton of them, but it would be a little surprising to me if he picked him up for mid.
Yeah, I think the other thing you said there about him being able to flex into a lot of positions is probably half the value. Not knowing other captains, not knowing where your money is being spent is incredibly valuable. And so, in this kind of almost war of attrition that comes from this bidding style, it's very interesting to see how the captains are approaching it.
Well, I mean, I happen to agree with you 100%. We're going to see Kyber come up next. The carry player who went for the most last season. Now, granted, this season we have a ton of carries. Last season, he went for about 850. So this season, we could see him go similar heights as we see his former teammate Dummy getting in there with quite a few bids. Um, we have Gav, or Giller Cav, going in there and bidding as well. He's drafting for Mark if you didn't know that yet. We have Magnetic also trying to get in there. We have quite a few people trying to get a piece of the Kyber pie. Um, so yeah, he's
Yeah,
already
this
up.
doesn't overly surprise me. We've talked about I think you and I spoke about it yesterday about how stacked this ADC class is when you talk
Mhm,
about, draft classes as such. There are lots of very, very viable carries in this league. And I use
mhm.
viable as a relative term, meaning to each other's ability. But Kaiba
Yeah.
is at the very top end of that discussion. Kaiba
Mhm,
was, in my opinion, one of the most dominant ADCs last season. That Chiron game, I remember him
mhm.
having a 6 or 7 KDA over a 5 game set was just
Yeah.
surreal. And this here as well, having so many different captains bidding the price up, it seems like this was a very competitive pick rather than maybe Rogue, where it was just one or two people wanting.
I mean, I agree 100%. And him going for 700, to be fair, honestly, it does surprise me a little bit. when I looked at our carry pool, and I was talking to you yesterday about this, I saw like 6 or 7 carries where I thought, man, they're all at the top end. Now,
Yeah.
granted, that means not everyone's going to get a carry who's at the top end. But when I was looking at it, I saw a lot of people sitting there at the top end of this carry list, and I was thinking maybe don't spend too much on him. But as I say that, we're gonna go into another carry here, Bracking, and he's a carry mid flex, so we'll have to see what teams decide to do with him. But we got a lot of teams interested in him as well, as he's already at that 450 marker.
Yeah, Bracking was a member of of the team I was on last season. He was a coach and then a player toward the back end of the season with some changes we made. I can understand the hype coming toward Bracking. He's an exceptional player and an exceptional guy to have in the team environment as well, which I think is something that is so important in these drafts. Is getting players that can play together, maybe even ones who haven't played together previously, but who have the potential to. The personality is going to mend. And the value of some of these top picks coming out is that I don't really see there being any clashes. I can't see them massively stopping a team from doing what they'd want to do. And so perhaps that's the way the captains are approaching this. They want a team that is going to stick together from the start and really gel into the rest of the season.
Yeah, and that's a a completely fair thing to do. I'm not surprised that Ian was the one to get
No,
Bracking.
not at
He
all.
played with him on a team, and to be honest, I didn't know anybody's draft board. But when I was thinking of it, I was thinking of the guaranteed pickups from teams, and I was definitely thinking Bracking Ian as being one of them. There's a few more that I'll reveal later if they end up going the way I predict. But to be honest, if last season's anything to gauge, I'm not great at predicting these drafts. So
No,
I'm not gonna go.
no, but
I'm not
that's the
gonna.
difficulty because it's just so different. Every team is going to approach things differently, and every captain, even round to round, seemed to change their mind last season. They're going to do this thing and then the next thing, and it's going to be interesting to see where the captains maybe have a more, you know, outlooking perspective on whether or not they know what they want to do from the start, or whether or not it gets adjusted by teams wanting a player, nominating them as a pick and then having them taken away can really throw their draft predictions off.
Yeah, something I've noticed here a little bit is Dummy has been putting his name out there on a lot of these picks so far. So we'll have to see kind of what his plan is overall towards the end of this. We see Rose going for 500. Now Rose is a very talented player. Oh wait, goes for 550. He said stop, maybe. Oh, she's gonna take it back. It looks like there's still some more bidding to happen. Um, Going in here. So Rose 550 right now. We could see him go for 600. He's one of those players. Um, he's one of those players who's just really solid, but he does have quite a few people who won't play with him because he doesn't really speak that much in comms, and he's not. He doesn't really have anything to offer in comms. He plays most of his league sets muted. So we'll have to see. We'll have to see how that goes.
A little bit
Rose
of
for
the
550
of the
is very fair.
a little bit of the caster's curse going on there. We talking about players who would gel with any team and could play for any team, and then Rose is the next player nominated. Certainly got the ability to do that, but the play style, like you say, the communications can cause issues as well. And
Yeah.
so my prediction of people looking more toward players who could fit anywhere they want them to seems to have maybe been a little bit premature. But 550 for Rose is a really good price. You're getting a very good return in terms of just technical ability at the game from that 550.
Yeah,
The
I
carries are
agree.
really being favored.
Yeah, carries are just straight up going in here. Killjoy already at 300, and Killjoy's one of those players. He's a fan favorite. Everybody loves him, and he's got the skill. So him
100%.
going for a ton of money would not surprise me here. I think he could be one of the most expensive carries in this draft here. Already at 550. If he ends at 550, that'd be stupid. But he's gonna keep going. 600 already. Um, yeah, once again, I'm not surprised that he's already starting off with quite a bit higher than the average player's cost.
Yeah, no, neither am I. We talked about the pool of ADCs we'd spoken about with other captains as well, about how there are so many good ones, but potentially we were a little bit off with that. That was from our conversation, not from theirs. And maybe they're thinking that there are maybe
Mm.
3 or 4 at the very top, and they don't want to get stuck at the moment when carries are getting to level 20 so early and are so important in winning these games. They really want to, double
Mm.
down on this position, get who they want when they want, and not really have to face much opposition for it.
I mean, 100% here. and it looks like Killjoy is gonna go for 650 to dummy here. This doesn't surprise me, as not many of you may know, but I was tuning into one of Killjoy's streams recently, and he is on an Albion Giants team with dummy, so it doesn't really surprise me all that much that they ended up teaming here together in Reap as well.
Yeah, no, I mean, we saw that last season. I'm sure we'll see it more again this season. Players who have played together in the past playing together again, and looking to draft each other just to make sure they have that synergy, that team play. However,
Mhm.
this one may be a little bit of a curveball here, Muffin. Not a name I'm even familiar with.
If I is this I think this might be Knuckle, if I remember correctly, and if it is, he did so well in an SDL showcase that he ended up getting promoted to the RSL. So if it is, I could definitely see him going for quite a bit of money. If I've heard a lot of great things about Knuckle, and it's one of the reasons that we ended up looking at him again,
Mhm.
was just because of all the great things we'd heard about him, and as well as his showcase performance. So if that is Knuckle, he could definitely be a big contender here. Um, really going in. Mask throwing in his first bid right there for 450, and it's already going to be trounced with a 500 from Skipper.
Yeah, and a diverse array of bids coming in here. We've got lots of captains bidding on the player here rather than just one or two, which does suggest that he has a high draft stock value throughout the league rather than maybe a sleeper pick that one or two captains know. This seems to be a player who is relatively highly valued here by everybody, because I think most everybody was seen a bid from apart from maybe Eon.
I agree. 100. Um, sorry, I got a little lost in my words. I got a quick update that. Oh, I think it's already been fixed. All right. Continuing on. Uh, we got him go. We got Nick going for 550. Pretty strong from him. Not insanely surprised. A lot of these players are gonna go for a little bit more earlier in the draft. So I'm not super surprised of him going for 550, but I think a lot of his gameplay is based off of that SDL showcase, and I'm a little worried here. But we see Ares coming up here for 50, and I think a lot of people are gonna want Ares. She was the runner-up support from last season, so I would not be surprised if she was going for a lot of money here.
Yeah, Ares, I think, will be one of the most contested picks throughout the league. I had that in my notes coming into this. I thought Ares was going to be a very contested pick. Uh, can play two roles technically if they are needed to, but like you say, number two support coming off of a relatively poor team as well for most of the season, and then joining up with casual mins at the end there for a bit of a playoff run. But Ares is an extraordinarily talented support player, and I can expect to see Eon especially going very very deep here to get that duo lane that I think he wants.
And that's exactly what we're seeing. It looks like he wants his dual lane to be bracking Ares here.
Yeah,
And if he's got, it looks like if he's got bracking and Ares, he's happy because he's thrown 650 on there. He's not going to have much money left to go, and he is going to get that. So we're already starting to see him with two players. And honestly, what a two players those are. Bracking and Ares is a very strong combo to center your team around, as well as himself
yeah,
onto the mix.
yeah, and it's players who play together and have played
Mhm.
together before. That seems to be a recurrent theme. I'm friends with all of these people. In particular, I think that this is just a trio you would not want to face up against. Ganks in the dual lane can be very oppressive, especially when we talk about the value of these ADCs. Bracking and Ares for what is it, 1300 all in is, in my opinion, fantastic.
Yeah, I happen to agree with you 100% here. A really strong three piece combo, and generally like this is starting to look like a casual main squadron run back. Uh,
It really is.
maybe later into the draft they're gonna um throw him up for quite a bit of money. We see Yuri going up onto the draft, and to be honest, he's one of my highest contention picks here. I genuinely see him going for a lot of money here. Pete is throwing in his money in the draft. He's already at 500. He's going to 600. We could see Yuri going for a lot of money here.
Yeah.
And ooh,
I had
Pete's
Yuri
getting
down
back
as
in
one
there.
of my I had Yuri down as one of my people who could go for 900 going into this draft. I had him down as one of my top five prospects if you want people that
Yeah.
are expecting to go for an awful lot of money. Yuri had a very very good season last time out. very, very well liked
Mhm.
throughout the community as well, and is just a very good player. There is no reason not to draft Yuri if you've got the money available and he fits into your plans. And I'm excited to see which team he goes to. It looks and Magnetic coming in with the last second bid on Pete there.
Going in with the last second bid there for 700. To be honest, I'm thinking it's quite low for him. I
Yeah,
when
I
I'm
thought it'd be
looking at
more than
the
this.
when I'm looking at the solo pool and I'm looking at him
Mhm.
and I just I don't even really think there's a whole lot of competition up there for him. So for him to realistically only go for 700 is a little weird to me. Oh, but he is gonna go for 750 so far. Dummy getting his bids in there. We'll have to see how if anyone else wants one more little piece, but Dummy picking him up if that's the way it goes would not he played on jungle for 900 with him, and that is going to be the way it goes. Dummy is going to pick up Yuri, who is honestly, in my opinion, one of the most valuable pickups in this draft.
Like I said, 100%. I definitely had him in my top five coming into this draft. I think he's an
Mhm.
exceptionally talented solo laner, and like you said, in a pool of solo laners which maybe isn't as deep as some of the other
Mhm.
positions that we have available here, having Killjoy,
Yeah.
Dummy, and Yuri on the same team is just a very strong triad. We talked about Bracking, Eon, and Ares. That core three that you look at for your team is just that's exceptionally strong for.
When you look at that, if we take a look back at that Albion Giants team, you'll notice there's another familiar face on it, and Yuri is also on that on that Albion Giants team. So maybe he's trying to get everybody but peaceful from that team there. Although I'd be hard pressed to figure out he's getting Amish for 200.
Yeah, I'd be very surprised to see the number one RSL support from last season go for 200. But another member of that serial killers team has just been nominated. We see the Goose going for 50 to Mask, and now up to 300 for Skipper, 350 with Magnetic. And Mask seems determined to pick up the Goose and reignite that mix from last year.
The Goose played a very incredible jungle, and in my opinion, an even more incredible solo. From that last season. So I would once again, he's one of those players who could be really dominant in one of those roles if he's getting picked up here. And for him to, he's already at 450, already 500. It's not surprising to me.
No, not at all. The Goose was, like you said, when he played for serial killers last season, was extraordinarily good, except that 0-0-0 Osiris game, which I'm not
Mhm.
quite sure how that happened. But I think that's more of a meme than anything else with the three zeros on the slash line. But we Magnetic manages to pick him up there at 550, not managing to rekindle that connection from last season. Rather, Magnetic getting.
I mean, 100% here. I mean, you got to be careful when you're spending 550, 600 on a player. You can kind of throw out the 400s pretty easily, but when you're getting towards that 550 area, it gets a little tighter on whether you should
Hmm.
spend that money, and that's what we're seeing is a lot more caution from these RSL captains. We have yet to see a 900 player, and the fact that Yuri didn't go for it makes me believe that we won't see one this draft.
Yeah, I didn't think we would going in. I thought Yuri and maybe Kyber, even a couple of those really dominant
Hmm.
players had the potential, but I certainly wouldn't have put any of them down as going for 900 as
Hmm.
surefire. Last season, we saw a couple of 900s in the first round, which kind of hamstrung the team development because there's just no funds available
Hmm.
to pick up anybody else. And now Mask returning to serial killers, picking up Kira Spaz, the substitute who had such a massive impact on their RSL final set. And that doesn't surprise me either. We talked about these past connections. They seem to be rearing their head at every turn.
And to be honest, it doesn't surprise me in the slightest. Picking who you're comfortable with is a surefire way to start off with good synergy.
Hmm.
And starting off with good
Definitely.
synergy is just a path towards winning this league. Is most teams that win this league are the teams that are the most synergistic with each other, and not the collection of the best five that I've seen in this league so far.
Very, very much so. You look at Napoleon Dynamite being so dominant for so long. They're all friends. Naturally, friends play very well
Yeah.
together. It's just a side effect of being able to communicate, being able to understand each other's play style, wanting to play with each other at every turn rather than queuing casuals by yourself. All of these things lead into playing very, very well. And the teams I think you manage to bring back a good core group of the same squad are always going to rise to the top in a division like this.
And 100%. I mean, there still has to be a little bit of that skill there, as friendship doesn't always win you everything. But it is a great it is a great factor um in how in winning this league and in winning this and just in competition in general is having good synergy is so important um to a squadron.
Most certainly. At every point, like you say, Napoleon Dynamite, some of the most naturally talented players, I guess, in the group that we have here to draft out of. But also that synergy was just what pushed them above
Mhm.
everybody else, what made them so dominant for so long. Until a couple of other teams who seem to be very friendly with each other kind of came around last season. Casual mains, even serial killers by the end of it, players who were playing with it very, very much.
And I 100%. And Jay is gonna be using his only free pass uh here this early on in the draft. I'm not sure what he's planning, but I think he's waiting for a few more people to spend a little bit more cash, as
Hmm.
he's got one player and he's only got 1,000 left. So I wonder what he's got planned for that.
Yeah, we've seen a lot more players going for that mid ground value in this draft. I think to what we saw last year, there were a lot going very, very high last year,
Mm,
and a lot going for very, very little. And this time around, we've seen a lot of 500 kind of value carrot people with a couple, Yuri getting above that and a couple falling just short. But it does mean that teams are quite quickly burning through their money. There aren't a huge amount of people left on the board who have enough to go out and really splurge on one or two more players. They need to be a little bit
mhm.
conscious of where they're spending their money going forward. And I think this is where the tactical side of that strategy really
Yeah.
comes in.
And Eagle Woman could be kind of a little bit of a sleeper in this pick. She was SDL last season. So she is one of those promotions. But she was a very clear promotion, in my opinion.
Mhm.
And she played extremely well in those final sets. And she's also shown up. She's been doing some private tryouts. She's been doing some of that stuff. So I'm not surprised to see her, go for 200. If you really do your scouting, you know about her, and you know about her skill. But if you weren't paying a lot of attention or looking for every opportunity to scout players, then you didn't really have. She wasn't on your radar.
Yeah, I think 200 for Real Woman is a brilliant, almost steal. You talked about steals going
Mm,
forward. This may very well turn out to be one of them. 200 for a mid laner is very, very little. I've played against Eagle Woman in other leagues,
mm.
and I know the talent that they possess as well. Certainly able to hold their own with most of what the RSL has to offer. And it's one I think that we'll be looking forward to seeing in week one, week two, seeing how they actually perform.
And I mean that's just the kind of thing we can make all our predictions up we want all here, but the real test will always be down on the field. Actually playing against each other. Wet Village is someone I've never heard of.
Yeah, neither have I. I didn't
I
even know
don't
that was a
I
player.
don't think he's played in a prospect here. I don't think he's played in a game here, unless this is something that I'm just he either a name change or something that's
Hmm.
missing here. This is a name that I do not recognize, but apparently uh someone little pump knows, maybe a friend of his from another league or something like that,
Hmm.
who's not too well known.
Yeah, we've talked about it, and it does happen. People come over from other leagues, they join up at the RSL to play with friends, and they do keep themselves relatively quiet going into drafts to make sure that they can be, that steal we talk about coming in. Nobody values a player; they're obviously going to go for a lot less. Wet Village, another one of those names, I think will be on my list of people to watch going into the season. Certainly now going up toward the 300 plus mark
Hmm.
when nobody seems to know who they are. I'm
Yeah.
very, very excited to see what this player can bring.
Now I'm a little interested here, as one of the most common strategies in drafts like these is to bid up the prices. But
Hmm.
there's another lesser known strategy, which is to let other people bid up the prices and to kind of trap them into a pick here. So it's a big game of chicken, I think, that we're seeing here with Skipper and Little Pump is when is that marker going to cut off? When maybe Skipper feels like he needs to pay a little more for this player, or maybe Skipper also knows this player. But I think this is one of those situations where they're playing a game of cat and mouse and trying to figure
Yeah,
out
I have
who's
to
willing to
agree.
bite.
I have to agree. I think Skip has just got his own after having this happen to him earlier on in the draft. The players' value's been driven up a little bit due to that. Like you say, game of cat and mouse. People are really trying to get one over on the other captains. I think Skip has just done exactly the same thing back, and I don't think it'll be the last time we see it this evening. I think it will continue to happen. Kamazots did it oh so
Hmm.
well last season,
Oh my
managing to
goodness.
force a lot of people to burn a lot of money. and turning into a very very competitive team throughout the season now with Jungle for 900.
I think every draft needs one of those guys who's willing to bid up everyone else. Otherwise, we start to see people coming around with the fifth pick with $800. We ain't trying to see that. The
Yeah,
less banana dollars, the better. All right.
the less banana dollars. Kamazo's playing it like Moneyball.
Skills is an interesting pickup here. He's very no pun intended.
Skilled.
He is very skilled. He's always been in the conversation for best in his roles pretty much every season,
Mm.
but almost always fails to qualify because mid-season he takes a role swap. Um,
Yeah,
so a little curious to see where he's gonna line up on this draft. Already at 400. Once again, I'm not surprised at all. I genuinely think if he sticked out a role for a whole season, he could win best in that role, or at least be one of the very very top players in that role.
yeah, I have to 100% agree with you there, Muffin. I had skills very highly on my own, draft boards coming into this, what I expected to see in mid and potentially even in jungle. And honestly, that flex potential there, you said Dummy might be playing it in the middle lane, potentially to put skills into the jungle or vice versa, gives a lot of flexibility there. And I think skills for 400 is a fantastic bit of business there by Jay.
Oh, it 100% is. That's one of the ones where I'm looking like if draft prices keep going like they're going, I don't think that would necessarily be a steal. But if we started to see
No,
some mid laners go, if we started to see some mid laners go for like 600, 700, I would most certainly consider skills a steal. But I
yeah,
just don't see them going that high, especially with how many we have in this draft. We have,
yeah,
I
there are
think,
there are a lot of mid lanes.
20 plus, 20.
Mhm.
We have an insane amount of mid laners registered for the draft.
Yeah, there are a lot of mid laners, and it was the same last season. We saw a very dense mid lane pool going into
Mhm.
season 4. Yet mid laners still continue to be extremely expensive. Peaceful, Spooky, myself, and a couple of others going very high on that list. Amish now nominated by Skipper. The bid is 50, but the number one RSL support from last season, I expect to see Mask throw a lot of money and maybe even a couple of kitchen sinks at this pick.
Yeah, I would not be surprised at all if we just saw this being bid up an insane amount. It is already at 450. I don't think these guys know that you can bid into increments of 50 right now because they are just throwing the money out there. And Mask is kind of in a deliberation. I know that he had an insane amount of success in that dual lane with him, so he's got to kind of consider how much is he willing to spend on this pick. He has enough to go all the way, and Skipper, I think, wants to either take him there or he wants to get that pick for himself.
Yeah, I think after Amish joined up with Serial Killers last year, I think they lost once through to
Mhm.
winning the RSL finals. They were an extremely dominant team, and a lot of what happened was due to Amish and the ability he was able to
Mhm.
bring both in comms and in the game. Such an impactful support. And there we go, 900 we see dropped onto Amish, the first and potentially only 900 value player. All those banana dollars at the door. Eon bids 901, but unfortunately Mod Diff does manage to knock him back down.
And I said earlier that 900 players probably weren't going to happen this draft, but um, it's he's one of the ones where he could have been.
Mhm,
I definitely saw a situation where Mass just goes 900 on him, and I saw it
mhm.
being I pretty much only saw it if anyone else was willing to take him to 900 on it, which I didn't
Yes.
think would happen, but we did see Skipper willing to essentially force the option.
Yeah, I saw Moss going pretty much as far as he was being forced to go with it. Like you say, I think he'd have been
Hmm.
very happy getting him at that 500 mark. I think it was never reasonably going to happen. I think everybody knew how likely Mask was to dump a lot of banana dollars into picking up Amish going into this season after that synergy and success they were able to bring last year around with serial kills.
Yeah, 100% here, and we're gonna move straight into Pete's nomination. Last time I'm pretty sure he nominated Bracking, so we'll have to
He
see
did.
who he's looking for. Um, he's looking to put up this time, as he's taking his time. He's
Using his
gonna use
free
his
pass.
free pass there.
Yeah, potentially, like you say, just strategy that we weren't privy to coming into this draft. I think there's a lot of reason to use the free pass. I've noticed the prices have been scaling up a little bit recently, wondering whether or not players are potentially starting to get not desperate as such, but certainly starting to put more
Yeah.
money into value picks, or whether the first round was feeling the water and now people are happy to do it, I don't know. But there seems to be a lot of value coming through as Eon nominates Son of Two Dog.
Now, so as Son of Two Dog is an interesting player in my opinion because he has a lot of people who could potentially be looking at him. You know, Magnetic could be looking at him. I'm pretty sure he's played in quite a few of Eon's private tryouts.
Mm-hmm.
Mask getting in there, a little surprising to me. He doesn't have too much money to play around with, and I'm pretty sure he already has his mid in Kira Spaz. So I don't know exactly what his plan there is, but Magnetic's looking to try and secure up the Two Dog pick, as Eon cannot go any farther in this draft or in this bid.
Yeah, I think that may be one where Eon's trying to see what he can get. I think he loved Two Dog on his team, and I think he was very happy to draft him had it gone through. But I don't think he's going to be, an emotional wreck over not picking up this player. Son of Two Dog is a very, very solid mid laner, and certainly deserves to go for at least 400, if not a lot more coming into this. I had him down in that mid tier range of value, but there are so many mid laners. I think a couple of years ago,
Mhm.
we maybe see him go for 5 or 600 there, but with how dense that pool is, the value does naturally deteriorate a little bit.
It's
And also,
it's
people like you say are running out of money.
it's just too much to, going above. Essentially, the average for a player will be 400. So going
Hmm.
above that for a role that is so dense and so tightly packed, they've
Hmm.
got to be offering something really special here. And when I'm thinking special, I'm thinking either peaceful, who is a very strong mid laner and who is very dominant in the role, which I don't
Hmm.
think we have a player who is insanely dominant in the role this season, or we
No.
have someone who's a really good communicator, known well, a good friend of someone, or
Hmm.
um, one of those situations where he's important to your team's comms. Those are the only two reasons I could ever see a mid in this draft going above 400.
Yeah, I had very few mid laners graded above that coming in, looking briefly through the polls, and I was going through and ticking some things off. I just think there's just so many of them, you can't truly justify it. Also, mid lane at the moment still having that issue of just being killed. And so maybe you could get extra value putting it onto an AD carry, putting it onto a solo laner, especially with solo being so light potentially with the discrepancy in quality over in that
Mhm.
lane. I'm not surprised to see somebody as good as 2 going for 400.
Ooh, Crow getting nominated up on one of the boards, and he was one of those players that was very obvious when we were looking at SDL
Hmm.
promotions to the RSL. He was pretty much dominant on no matter what team he played on. Um, had even shown some good showings in RSL scrims.
Hmm.
So to see him thrown up on the board is no surprise to me. What is a surprise to me is that he's only at 50 rank.
Yeah, this is a Valiant, right?
Yes, this is a Valiant.
Yeah, cool. I sometimes get the names confused, but yeah, Valiant very very talented jungler. I jungled against him in other leagues, and it's always a
Mhm.
very good competition. Certainly an RSL quality jungler, like you said. Jungle potentially being a bit lighter here as well. It's one of the
Mhm.
roles I didn't have a huge amount of very very talented junglers coming in for. So 250 for Crow seems a very very good price.
Yeah, I think the main two roles that are really strapped seem to be jungle and solo, as um, there isn't very many in either role, and I think there's also a pretty big gap in those roles when you look at the top and the bottom of skill level in those roles.
Yeah, we certainly saw that in the solo lane, for instance, last season. In season 4 of the RSL, where some of the top level solo laners and the bottom level were very divergent, and as a result, teams were able to really play
Mhm.
through that lane. It's the same now with the annoying power of Sundering Spear and how Sundering Axe rather, sorry, and how good it can be at just killing everybody on the map. I'm not at all surprised, in particular, to see junglers going for very little due to the current meta. But at the same time, like you say, the player pools really demand a little bit more than this for those top level junglers.
Yeah, I mean 100% here. Like there is just unfortunately, there is just quite a big gap between the best and the worst in the RSL, and so especially in the jungle role. So when you're looking at a jungler, I'd be looking to spend big.
Yeah, I mean, we saw it last season, even with like Dummy Slick, for instance,
Mhm.
going for 900, having a team named after him because of that diverging talent pool we've talked about now. As Asma gets nominated, a player who had some showings last year in season 4. Keep saying last year, this year in season 4 rather. and certainly looked viable in two roles, I believe, throughout his time in the league.
Yeah, and he showed quite a few showings, but I also know that he's not only a solo player. I know he plays in some other roles, so we'll have to see
Mhm.
how he goes here. It looks like Lil Pump is willing to go up to 250 on him. It took him a little while to think about that one. Um, so I wouldn't be surprised if this is kind of where that draft, where Amza ends up going is that 250 route.
Yeah, again, we've talked about it. People are getting strapped to cash now. It's certainly a difficult part of the draft for people to properly spend money. You're going to see, I think, a lot more people who are nominated by the person being picked up by that same team now because people just haven't really got the money to compete. It's getting down to that stage now where you're filling out your rosters, you're picking up the players you want that
Hmm.
maybe haven't already been selected by other people you weren't willing to spend 500 or 600 on. Now you're coming down to those players that right, this is a good solo laner I can get. This is a good jungler I can get who would just round out my big three, which I spent most of my money on.
Yeah, and you know, like you said, that people are starting to get a little bit more strapped. Let's take a quick look. While we wait for Pete to select his person, we have Action Days only at 1,000. He's still a big spender at 1,050. We got Mark who still has some money strapped around. Pete who hasn't picked up a single player yet, still has all his money strapped around. So watching him go out there and do a lot of work. But let's talk about Kitten's Panda right now. That man had such an insane showing on support during his RSL prospect games. I would not be surprised if he went for quite a bit. That prospect game looked like the dummy Kittens show, because those two were just going really really strong in that role. And we see Pete Eaton Killer Giller Cav going hard for this pick here.
Yeah, all the way up to 600. We talked about people not having money left. Again, as soon as I say something, I'm proven wrong. But we see a lot of money being dropped down. I don't blame them either. Miyuki, a very talented player, somebody who can play multiple roles as well. That I could say those support prospects just looked so impactful. And it's
Yeah.
another one of those roles that maybe doesn't have the depth that carry and mid have. So you can truly justify this kind of spend on somebody if you think they're the
Mm-hmm.
one that you need to get things going.
Mm-hmm. I agree 100%. And we're getting close to that point in the draft where 900 is no longer the price you need to spend to guarantee a player. There's only two people who can go there, and that's Mark Wings and Pete. And if I'm thinking right now, what should I be doing? Other captains should be thinking right now, what should I be doing to get them to spend a little bit of their money? Because
Yeah.
when it comes down to it, if one of them goes down, let's say one of them spends a lot of cash on a player, that the cost to get a player could go down to 650. It could go down to like
Mhm.
400. We could start to see going later into the draft that people are just getting players for almost nothing. Um, Banjo, an interesting one. One of my former teammates from Galactic Gangsters. Good to see him come on this board. He's already at 200, and I know that some captains have expressed some interest in him, but I'm not sure exactly where that places him in this draft here. We see Skipper willing to go up to 200 here, and if he does, that would leave Mark with only 1,050 left over in this draft.
Yeah, I think Banjo is one of those players who could potentially be worth even more than this,
Mm-hmm.
just purely in the fact that they can flex in the jungle and in the solo lane.
Mm-hmm.
Two roles we've talked extensively about not having a huge amount of options for,
Mm-hmm.
and so having the potential to pick somebody up later to make your decision, prolong that thought process about who
Yes.
you pick up and when, gives you a lot of value in this pick. I think Banjo for 200, no matter what role you put him in, is a very good, astute bit of business going through this draft. Um, I think he certainly could have gone for a lot more, but let's just see whether he manages to stay on a team.
Yeah, and we're just gonna have to see as it goes into it. Dummy's nomination here is a little interesting to be because I don't think he's gonna get anybody he nominates. He's got 200. He's got the lowest amount of cash here. I don't think there's a unless he nominates someone that just there isn't really any interest in. Yeah, and he's gonna use his pass because of it. That I don't think he
I
was
think
gonna
that's very
get.
clever.
I don't think he was gonna get anyone crazy there. I know there are a few options I'm looking at specifically that would work well on his team. There's still
Yeah,
quite a few very strong players from last season still over. There's a lot of good SDL promotion players still around. There's quite a few of my former teammates still around on the board. So I'm interested to see, as we're continuing to go into this draft, what's gonna come down, what's gonna unfold here, as we're seeing a little bit of an interesting draft board.
We really are. I think we're seeing something very different to what I had drawn up in my head.
Hmm.
I think values have been pretty accurate on, but some of the play I've got certain players in my top five in each role that haven't been nominated at all yet, and
Hmm.
I'm very excited to see where they go. It could lead to some extraordinarily stacked teams as we get toward the end here. Players who are as valuable as some of the players we saw go in the first and second rounds still available. People haven't got the money to really compete with each other now. You could see somebody picking up an all-star team for 1,000 Reap dollars just because of the way the draft is planned out. There is an awful lot of talent left. And I'm very excited to see who comes up. But a lot of passes coming out here. I think a lot of people are realizing they haven't got the finances to compete if they nominate players they actually want.
The thing that I'm seeing though is that if all these people pass, all their
It
passes are
wastes it.
worthless.
Yeah,
Um, so I'm a little surprised, especially with people that still have some money. Little Pump is one of the passes that makes me a little curious. He has some money to run around. Mag also has some money to run around. They could definitely get players if they want them. Especially Little Pump, as he seems to be nominating players that aren't too well known in the league. Obviously, Nick wasn't insanely well known. Wet Village, neither of us knew. And Asthma, he's gotten for pretty cheap.
yeah. I mean, a team that obviously he rates and he's thought out ahead. I think certainly from the way he's discussed it. And now we see Taz nominated by Jay up for currently 150 on Mask. Another one of those serial killer reunions potentially coming through. But Taz, somebody I've played with previously, somebody I'm friends with. Quite generally, we speak a lot, and also somebody who's extremely good at this game. He won it with serial killers. He's been balling out in a lot of the prospect games that he's played in. I'm excited to see how much he goes for, even in this stacked mid lane class.
Yeah, I mean, once again, he also has that flex potential, which is really nice. Um, really nice for him as he can, we've seen him in jungle, we've seen him in carry. Honestly, I think we could see him in pretty much any role at this point. I think he could learn it
Yeah,
very quickly, and it could take on the challenge of pretty much any task and become very solid at that role.
100%. Taz is a player who has got an awful lot of flexibility because his base ability comes from being just good mechanically at the game rather than being specifically good at any role. But when it gets to this point and maybe a couple of your top choices have gone in other roles and maybe you had him very high in mid, but you can
Mhm.
now flex him into the jungle. You can play him in support even if you want to. You get this extremely valuable player all the way up to 550 now with Jay putting a lot of money down on Taz.
Yeah, Jay's looking to kind of ball out here, but Skipper wants to confirm the pick as Jay does not have 700. He's looking to confirm the pick. He goes all the way for 650, and that's gonna lower down the price of what you need to guarantee a player. That price is now
Very much.
650. If you want a player, that's all you have to spend right now.
Yeah, that's an equivalent of a 900 in a way, isn't it? Because
Hmm.
you're getting a player for max money essentially. That's as much as you can spend on, as you sort of have to spend on somebody to just decide they are yours. A very good player to have at that kind of value. But again, mid lane very very stacked, potentially looking over into that jungle role, something we know Taz certainly has the ability to play as well. Personally, very excited to see what happens with this, and something I'll be watching going into the next season.
No, 100% here. It looks like Ask is up on a lock here. We'll have to see. What is honestly when we're getting in here. This is one of my favorite parts in the draft. What are what are some of these plans coming in here? We have Big Ian coming in here for 50, and he is not one of those. He's not one of the most well known players here. I think he was on casual mains for a single week. And he played
Yeah, he
support for
played one game.
them. So he's not super well known in the Reap Smite League, and that's it. He's just gonna go for 50,
That's the steal of the draft.
and
Calling it, putting
that's
my
the
neck
steal
on
of
the
the
line. I'm
draft.
calling it. Biggest Ian for 50 is the steal of the draft. I played with him. I played against him. Another fellow Brit said,
Hmm.
flagging. I wish I had a Union Jack here just to wave, um, make a little bit of a statement. But biggest Ian for 50 is an extremely valuable pick. He plays several roles very very well, and that's looking like a very good team there. Looking at Mask with biggest Ian and Amish already secured, looking very very dangerous going into the new season.
And I mean, I happen to agree with you 100%. When I'm looking at, when, Kira is an insanely talented mid laner.
Mhm.
Amish, I'm a little confused here. So I saw Big Ian playing support. What role do you think he'll be playing on this team? Do you think Amish will be swapping roles, or do you think Big Ian will be uh taking a different role?
So Big Ian in a lot of the games I've been playing, prospect games I've played, and has been lined up to play in the solo lane. So there's definitely
Mm,
some flex potential there. I know Amish has the potential to play in the solo lane as well. Big Ian can even play mid if he turns around and wants to. I've played in a scrim with him in the mid lane as well,
mm,
where he just dominated on a Vulcan
yeah.
pick. So I think that might again be the value 50, reap dollars or whatever else we're calling them, for a player who can competently play 3, 4 roles is just an extremely good value pick. It allows him to kind of round off a team with a player he obviously likes and wants. So you've got Kira, you've got Amish, you've got Mask, and now biggest Ian looking at one player with the remainder of his money, and he's in a very solid position for
And
himself.
that player seems to be Loshak here, as he's gonna look to round off his draft. So it looks like we could be seeing. Honestly, there's the possibility of Mass going jungle on this roster. Um, there's a lot of possibilities. I'm interested in seeing what that team and what they plan on, and what they plan on that role. I see a lot of flex potential on that team, and I see a lot of
Yeah,
possible rotations around on that squadron of what kind of players they're looking at. And he's already done with the draft. He's got 350 left over. He could still bid on people if he felt like it, but um, you know, um, you get in the troubled situation where you bid on someone you don't actually want. He'd have to replace one of his players.
yeah. The thing for me is he's gotten 4 of his nominated picks, which is obviously saying he's got the strategy coming into the draft. He knows who he wants, where he wants, and he wants to do them. Rose now potentially being traded for Taz rather. Are we seeing a a big old no coming out? I was just about to say, are we seeing a very the very first trade I believe of this draft? I know there were a few attempted last time around, but a little bit of a meme response there, certainly meaning no.
100% here. And to be honest, I don't even really blame him. When I look at that team, when I look at Mark's team, he has Taz. I don't know exactly if Rose would be the kind of person who could fit on that team.
No,
I don't. And to be honest, with Taz being such a flex potential here, we could see a lot go down here. We see Llama God going up for 50. Do you know who that is? Because I don't.
I don't. Once again, I don't know the name, unfortunately. Um, I most of my scouting was based on what I'd seen last season in the draft, players I played with in other leagues, and Llama God, not somebody I recognize. Love the name, however. Certainly some extra points there going for the name. But I don't recognize it. But certainly players seem to now 3 different teams with bids on this player all the way up to 350 already. At this stage in the draft, that's a lot of didgeridoos.
I mean, it 100% is. 350 at this point. When we look at 350, there's already quite a few captains who are no longer able to bid here.
Mhm.
There's still quite a few that could take him out here. But the thing that kind of interests me most is that one captain has been sitting and waiting and waiting and waiting this whole time. He's got 1600, not a single player, and to be honest, he's getting close to that point. Now, if we see a few of these captains spend some money where he could just build whatever team he wanted. If we
I
get to
think
that
that might
point
be
to
the
where
goal.
I think if we get to that point to where he only has 400 left, or where captains only have 400 left, he just gets to pick. He just has to
Yeah.
sit there at 400, wait for captains to bid and let him pay 400, and then he can just get whatever player he wants. Um,
I think that seems to be the goal. I don't think there's any other reason really for there to be 1,600 sat in that bank account at the moment, unless he's trying to accrue some interest and maybe pick up some really good plays in season 6. But the way things are going, I think the intent there is just to go. I think they've got a seemingly solid draft plan. They know which players they want. They're going to let everybody else burn their money and just secure the squad they want going forward.
and when I'm looking at this player pool, I'm noticing that not many there's quite a few teams still without their solos here. So I think that's what a lot of teams are
Mhm.
going to start to focus on coming into this portion of the draft is getting my solo, because I need a solo laner. I can't have
Yeah.
I can't not have one. So I need to get mine before there are none left.
I think it's also one of those roles that can be a little bit tricky. I think that you say that the skill gap can be a major issue as an ADC if you just are better than the other player. There's often solo kills there. But also, mid laners can flex into carry if they need to with a couple of weeks training. Junglers can kind of play support and vice versa if they need to. But changing it to solo is a completely different beast. I know a lot of players who just won't touch that role with a barge pole, me being one of them, really, if I'm being honest. And I don't really blame teams for spending a lot of money there if they need to, just to secure somebody who can be that disruptive force that we saw people like Yuri, people like
Yeah.
Eon, those top level players being last season.
Yeah, and 100% here. And Heat with securing Roski for 200 is ever closer to that position where he can just get whatever player he wants, and that's kind of a scary thought as a captain. Is look at a when you look at this list, there's still so many players that are still really good left over on this list. And I'm just looking down over here. I see, a lot of players who, there's even still quite a few players who won awards who are still on
Hmm.
this list and haven't been even looked at. And so it's a scary thought to think of that you can just kind of have whatever team you want.
Yeah, I mean, I've been trying to avoid names through this far, but I think we're deep enough that I can start to talk. I mean, people like Kamazots and Spooky, for instance, teammates of yours last season, um, in discussions for awards. Spooky won an award, still not mentioned.
Hmm.
I know we've talked about how deep that mid lane role is, but the RSL award winner from last season still hasn't been mentioned this deep into the draft. There is so much talent left on people's boards. I'm excited to see what teams come out. We should have a really competitive season this year with just the amount of sheer quality that sits there.
Oh, I mean, I'm gonna happen to agree with you 100%. Spooky was the name I was looking at when I noticed that there was an award winner still on the board. Um, and so, it's kind of crazy to think. And it looks like Slime Games is trying to get another 50. It looks like he's trying to get another player, Matnar 96, who uh isn't super well known. But if you've been paying attention to these prospect games, you'll notice that he was in that SDL prospect game, and then he was in the RSL draft. So he performed exceptionally well down there, and that's kind of starting to seem like a theme. Is that these players that got promoted during these games are starting to show up in this draft.
Yeah, we see Slimy here seemingly creating a team of people nobody's heard of, and he seems to know. This is another nomination from him that is a player that I don't recognize the name of outside of watching a couple of prospect games as I have in preparation for this. Really, I can't comment too much on it except for again extremely excited to see how these new names perform. We know what you're getting from a Spooky, you know what you're getting from a Camazot. But with these new players, it could be anything. It could be fireworks. It could be not. I'm just looking forward to it as we see Seraph here nominated by
On
Dummy Slick.
another SDL promotion player, and he's been in that SDL for quite a long time, but he has always had visions for Granger, as I would like to say it. He's always had that vision of being a much better player, and he really wants to. I think he really wants to compete in that list. So seeing him come up here is really good thing to see, and I'm glad to see him get drafted this season.
I mean, it's the purpose of the SDL, isn't it? And just as much a way the RSL to pro
Yeah.
people out of it as well. Looking at these development leagues, trying to improve players, and the fact that you see somebody who so many promotees here going in the draft rather than as undrafted free agents afterwards, which is where I thought a lot of them would go. And that's not to show any disrespect to these players. It's just that not knowing how they stack up against RSL level competition makes them somewhat risky draft choices. But I'm really glad to see players going in these rounds here, where it obviously means that these captains have value in them. They have confidence in them that they can compete at that level.
And I agree 100%, and I'm excited to see. He's one of those players that I'd love to watch and see grow as get further and further and further and further into this league here. So I'm excited to see him. He's one of my favorite SDL player promotions that I'm
Mhm.
happy to watch.
Yeah, extremely. So these are the things that I love about these league, especially especially the community we have, is that people want to see everybody do well. I want to see these SEL players come in and really hit it like a wrecking ball when they come into these games. That's what we all want to see. You don't want stomps left and right. We want as many competitive teams as we can get.
Hmm.
As good competition as is physically possible to try and improve everybody. And these SDL promotees is certainly making their mark felt today.
Yeah, 100%. I agree with you. Ryan, why does that name sound familiar?
So
Uh,
O'Brien played some of the RSL prospect games, as far as
mhm.
I'm aware, and then I know played in Eon's in-houses that he played in
Yep.
his server in preparation for this draft, and was extremely dominant. Is the only way I can describe it. I know he did about 3,000 damage to me with Sundering Axe, so I'm well aware of how dominant this player can be in that solo lane. And somebody I had down as a potential sleeper in this role, you know, performed well on a not so great prospect team, and then performed very well on a very good prospect team.
Now
I'm
the name's
extremely
coming
excited to see
back to
what
me.
Brian can do.
This guy is one of the players who has Eon's seal of approval
Yes,
when it comes into the solo lane. And to be honest, when you're looking at the Reap Smite League talent pool, that's that's something that's worth having. So
it's the gold standard.
yeah, I'd have to agree with you. It is the gold standard. You're getting that seal of approval and only going for 150. I think he's one of those. He's another one of those players who's gonna be a steal. Getting a good solo
Mhm,
for 150.
definitely.
That's kind of. I don't know if it's necessarily competing with you on biggest Eon, but or biggest Ian,
No,
but it's
no,
it's still one of the best steals here.
100%. I think it is a steal of the way you've described it. I don't think it's, we're not going to be talking about this a steal of the draft, I don't think,
Mhm.
but certainly going to be talking about it as a very good value pick. Certainly somebody who I had going for a little bit more than he's gone. When you talk about
Yeah.
how thin that solo lane is, if our predictions are correct, obviously we're just talking about this from an analysis perspective. If the role is as thin on the ground as we think it might be, you're starting to question 150 for a player this good.
Mhm.
Maybe could have gone for an awful lot more, but it's the state of the draft that a lot of people don't have a lot more money than that to go for. And if
Mhm.
these, high rollers, shall we say, who've still got plenty of didgeridoo to play with, have if they aren't in their draft pools, then they're
Mhm.
going to go for very little just because the people aren't spending money anymore.
Yeah. Well, the high roller is up to bat, and we're gonna see what he's looking at in the rest of his team. If he's always on that 450 and can get on it every time, he gets what he wants. He'll have 50 left over from this draft if Action Days decides to take him to 450 every time. So, you know, um, we'll have to see. We'll have to see. How this goes. He can potentially just get every player he wants from this point on.
Odd stepdad thrown up at 50. Do you know which role he's planning on playing this season?
Honestly, I know which. I think he wants to play. I, no, I don't know because
But
when I look
that
at Hard
that leads well into
Stepdad,
what I was going to say.
when I look at Hard Stepdad, like I'm thinking of a guy who can play every role.
Yeah.
I'm thinking of a guy who can play every role at a very solid level,
Hmm.
and he doesn't have very many cracks. He doesn't have many holes in his roles, and he's genuinely really good. He's genuinely good in all of his roles, and he's gonna get him for 50. Um, that's kind of a surprise for me.
That's
Uh,
a massive surprise.
that's for him to just go for 50 is I I don't know what to say. I mean, he is
No,
Hard Stepdad's a very talented player and showed up last season and especially showed up in these prospects in the carry role
hmm,
where he um if you're watching the prospects, especially in the casual bots in houses, he seemed to be just beating players,
hmm.
that you wouldn't expect him to beat in pretty much all roles. Um, so him to go for 50 is I think another one of those insane steals.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's going to be one of the steals of the draft. We talked a lot about flex potential. We've talked a lot about the ability to play solo lane. We've talked a lot about communications and getting on with the team, all things that drive your value up, 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 and up. He fits every one of those boxes and has gone for 50. So we clearly have no idea what we're talking about. And we're just talking out, but it seems that it's just the stage of the draft now where people aren't spending a huge amount of money on players. We talked about Pete having all the money to spend in the
Yeah.
world. People maybe just not wanting to mess with him, maybe not wanting to realizing they can't get a player and just saying just have him because we're never going to be able to run you anyway. There are lots of things that go into these stages of the draft. That strategy we've talked about extensively, but that seems extremely cheap to me.
Oh, and 100%. We're gonna see Atomic Hawk come in And let me try and have my memory collect himself. I've seen this name quite a few times here, and I'm trying to remember where I've seen. Um, it looks like he must not be super well known as we see him only at the 50 marker here, and that's gonna be all. The captains are done. So Aries is gonna go straight. Stop that up real quick. Go for white sheep.
Yeah, another player I'm not overly, familiar with looking at. I recognize the name. I think I've seen potentially a couple of games here and there. But I think any player who's good enough to be drafted in this spot, above some of the players we've talked about, going for 50 is going to be a steal. It's a natural
Mhm.
side effect. I think if you said spooky for 50, you'd jump out your skin, wouldn't you? You just wouldn't ever expect it.
Yeah,
And so I think seeing these players go above players like that there has to be something there as we see Spartan 2021 nominated.
you know, Spartan is, I mean, at this point, the only person who can deny this pick are Magnetic and are Pete, so I don't think most captains are going to try um, to deny it. As why would you if you can anyway? He's only got one spot left. You're not wasting his money.
Yeah.
So,
No, I think that's the case.
I think pretty much anyone he would pick up, unless Pete wanted it, or unless Pete or Mag wanted it, it was going for 50.
Yeah, I think I'm kind of repeating myself a little bit here and somewhat what you've said, but I think we are going to see a lot of players going for this 50 mark. I think it's getting to the point where people almost just get their pick like in a
Yeah,
more traditional draft. I think it's going to be a lot of people nominating going for 50 or maybe 100,
yeah.
150 at the most. I don't see a lot more changing there. So we're almost looking at a more traditional draft from this point on, which changes the strategy. It changes the way you have to approach it. You're essentially picking, are you going best player available?
Yeah.
Are you going for a player you think could be a very good sub? Are you looking for a player who you may think, has the potential to fit into your squad? There are a lot of different uh, strategies now, rather than maybe trying to burn other people's money. That seems to have gone out the window in the last couple of rounds.
Oh, I, I have to agree with you. Eon come out here, and this is one of the ones I could see not going for 50. I could see Eon trying to get a player that other people would want.
Hmm.
I think there's quite a few people left on this board. Once again, Spooky, he's still up there.
He is.
Um, what'd you say?
He is.
Oh yeah,
He's available and he fits the team need. It's where I'd expect to see Young go here.
I still see a lot of very reliable players up on this list. I've seen some players that I know about that aren't super popular going in
Hmm.
there, but we see him picking up a loiter, which has me thinking he doesn't plan on putting Ares in the support role.
No, I like Loader. I've spoken with Loader in person in Discord chats a lot. I've played with Loader, very very talented support player, but I've never seen them play anything other than support.
Yeah,
Which naturally, like you say, leads me to think Ares in the solo lane, which I know was what the intention was in season four. Which may satisfy Ares' needs as a player a little bit more. Loader, a very good support. I know there's a lot of jokes about only being able to play Fafnir and Ymir. That is blatantly
that's all
untrue.
you need.
I've played at the moment it is all you need, but I've seen them play the Kepri, I've seen them play a couple of the picks and look very, very good. So I think again, anybody going for 50 in this draft is going to be a very good value pick. I think Loider is certainly one of those.
And I have to agree. That now Pete, Mr. Moneybags on the clock himself. We'll we'll have to see. What he's going to pick up here. And I mean, once again, his draft has already been secured. And
Hey,
that's you, boy. That's me. That's me, baby. I'm on the draft, baby.
now I think this is a massive reach. I think paying 50 for
Mm-hmm.
Muffin is
I'd have to
just
agree.
just far too many
Honestly,
dollars to
dude,
pay. Hey,
how many banana dollars? Like, would
um,
I wouldn't be willing to spend 50 on myself.
far too, far
Far
too.
too high.
I'll rate.
Maybe
I'll
the
meet you
sub
at one.
position. Maybe.
Maybe I'll meet you at a Burger King meal deal. That's all I
Maybe.
can do here in this deal. But no, again, looking at a muffin, hard for you to comment on yourself. I appreciate, but you for 50 after some of the performances we saw. Maybe not that last week of play in the RSL, but prior to that, not an extremely good value pick at $50. Certainly
you
in
know.
in any draft. Most definitely in this draft with the way things have gone. Just another solid pick is the way I'd probably describe it. Pete's putting together a team here. He's got all the money in the world and has barely spent anything. Is that three picks now for a total of 300 or something in that kind of
Yeah,
ballpark?
300 as
Yeah,
a total of 3 picks, and you
300 for
know,
3 picks with
and
1,300 in the
and
bank.
Roski is 2/3 of that. Um,
And
so
yeah, yeah,
so well,
plenty of
well,
value.
yeah, we'll have to, we'll have to see who he wants last on this draft board, but we're gonna go right into it, and he's gonna pick up. Ooh, Rosie is an interesting pick here. He had a little bit of a struggle, um, on the in the SDLS season, but I think it was more so that the team that she was on ended up having 0 wins, and sometimes that
Hmm.
happens. Sometimes you just, it happens that you just don't get on a great team. But we also saw a lot of her performance, in that season. Performed extremely well, even
Hmm.
as just as an individual. So she's another one of those players that I would really like to see, coming into this next.
Yeah, there's a lot of value in players who look good on bad teams. We talked a lot about it with Aries, for instance, going very high up the draft, but somebody who looked very good on a, let's be honest, not so great team. But the other thing is, as well, is I think the ability to get on with everybody, the ability to be a good listener and learn a lot, and the ability to want to learn are hugely valuable features going into these drafts. You get a lot of players at this level who just think they know everything and are the best at everything, and that is not that's not conducive to a good team.
Yeah.
Rosie's almost the polar opposite of that. Somebody who is just going to learn a lot, want to learn, and want to get better. And I think that's a great pick, and again, a good value pick at 150.
Okay, and we see my boy coming in on the board. Cryptic already at 150. How you feeling, man? 150.
150. I mean, it's quite the fall from grace, from last season's first overall 900. But as I said earlier on, I well and truly believe that's one of those draft hype things where you play well a couple of games in the run up and nobody's ever heard of you. 150, I think, is Pete coming in. Pete's finally going to spend some money. Going in at 200, he's almost doubling his expenditure for the month at this point.
And it looks like he's just, uh, you know, does Pete want this player? That's that's really the only question that needs asked.
Literally, yeah.
Is he just
How much does
is he
Pete want
just
to play?
messing with Magnetic, or does he actually want the player? And we'll have to see. We'll just have to see. It looks like he didn't want the player, and he just trying to mess with Magnetic a little bit, even though uh there wasn't really a point.
And Magnetic and I played together on casual mains last season, playing in spot. I don't know where I'm going to be playing. I haven't been told yet about where I'll be playing this season going forward. But I'm excited to play with Mag again, certainly from that perspective. Playing last season, a very talented player. I'm excited to see what happens.
Yeah, I mean, 100% here. You know, it's all where it goes down. I've seen Son of Two Dog. I think I've seen him in both roles, support
Hmm.
and in mid. So really, there's just quite a bit of flex potential from you both there. And there's my boy Kama going up on the board here. Um, you know, and Kama's another one of those players. He's really solid. I know he tried out for. I knew he tried. I can't say that word. He tried out for Lucio's team. In this thing. So seeing them be interested in him is no surprise to me. And honestly, he's a very reliable player. You've played with him as well in other leagues.
Yeah,
Um,
most certainly. Camelot's just a very
oh,
solid player, and Pete getting in there at the last second with the snipe,
okay, with
taking him for
this snipe
200.
here.
Oh no, Rose
Oh,
Aries is going to take that back and reopen it. But again, it comes down to whether Pete wants to play it, isn't it?
hmm
It's whether or not Pete
yeah.
wants to go out there and
It's just
spend any
yeah.
more.
Does Pete want him? And that's really
Hmm.
what's the deciding factor in literally every pickup here is does Pete want him? And we're gonna find out because at this point Pete can't spend the rest. Even if
No,
he wanted to. I guess he could just deny picks from people all day and waste
just for the sake of it. Yeah,
throw his
I
money
don't think that's
down the
exactly
drain.
Pete's wheelhouse.
Yeah.
I don't think that's
No.
exactly Pete's MO going forward. But we are getting, toward that stage in the draft now where Pete has all of the say. He decides who gets who at this point, essentially,
Oh,
whether or not he wants to drive up the cost. Camazot's an exceptionally talented support player, somebody who's brilliant for comms, exceptionally good at keeping morale up, shall we say. He's an extremely nice guy. So I think a fantastic value at 250 dollars. Looking there now, Jay getting it right again at the last second, going for these Sniper Ghost Warrior drafts at 250.
Yeah, and I mean 100%. Like that's just um this is how it is, 250 at this point in the draft is honestly an honor. Like going
Yeah,
for the rest of your captain's money, so that's gotta be worth it. We're gonna see Dummy Slick looking to round out the rest of his squadron here. And there's still some crazy people left over. Um,
there really is.
there's quite a few promotions from last season. There's some fan favorite players. Um, there's still some players who did really well in the last season as well. I would not be surprised. I'm honestly surprised that some of these players have gone through without any without sorry, I'm kind of stumbling over my. I'm surprised that so many of these players have gone through the draft at this point.
Yeah, I mean, especially when you look, we keep doubling back to it, the fact that Spooky is still there. He is
There he
still
is.
available. RSL mid award winner last season, looked extremely good at all stages. On two different teams as well. The ability to again to get on with anybody, the ability to want to learn as well. 50. If Spooky Mars goes for 50, I may be changing my opinion on Steel at the draft.
I mean, does does Eon or Pete want him? I think I'm pretty sure on Pete's team I'll be going in the mid lane, so
Okay.
I don't think he'll throw me in there, especially with him already picking up Roskies. Um,
Hmm.
so I don't think any of that'll be going down, but it's really just does Eon want him? And
Yeah.
no, at this point, no.
Yeah, $50 for 50 REIT dollars, $9 $dollars
Yeah,
for Spooky is an extra. I mean, you get an SCC caster there for $50. I think it's certainly
I
something that
I think there. I mean,
people are going to regret. I think this is one of those picks that people are going to regret.
there is the potential there of people being worried about his weekend schedule and not being able to scrim as much,
Hmm.
not being able to play as much.
Very possible.
So there is a lot that can go into that. Um, but gosh, dude, that team is scary.
Very much so.
That team is
Extremely
scary.
so.
Dude, I'm thinking when I'm looking at that team, I'm looking at a Yuri solo dummy jungle, um, probably spooky mid,
Yes, I'd imagine so.
yeah, and Rosie support, Killjoy carry. Like that is a scary team. Looking into this next
Yeah,
season,
definitely.
um,
100%.
and it looks like we're gonna see a failed trade going through.
You've got two
Mid.
award winners on that team. You've got is it two runner up or one runners up rather? Sorry, in
Um,
um
yeah, one
the
runner up.
awards there as well. Like that's a scary team looking
Well,
forward.
two if you
It's
count
very
Lifesteal
difficult.
awards.
Yes, it's very difficult to predict, who's going to be good at just the draft stage. But you'd be hard pressed to find somebody who doesn't think that's going to be a good team.
And I have to I have to agree with you there. That is going to be a very strong team coming in this next season. And we got Mr. Moneybags coming up once again as that last pick. Honestly, if Eon bids, he's trolling. So um, so we'll see what is his last pick of the draft. Um, and he's going to try and trade Roski and a big hug for Yuri. Uh,
You might need a big wish rather than just a
might need
big
a
hug,
big wish here.
possibly a
Um,
prayer. Yeah,
possibly a prayer. Um, uh,
yeah,
quite the appropriate response here from Dummy Slick here.
most certainly so.
Yeah. If I'm uh if I'm Dummy and I get Yuri again, there's just no way. Um, I'd be I'd be willing to give that away.
No, no, certainly not. And it wouldn't make sense. Like we say, we just sat here and praised how good we think that team is going to be. You don't want to break it up. You don't need to do anything. You've got to support there, a likely support that is extremely willing to learn, extremely good at the game as well. Somebody who will benefit massively from having those kind of players around them, and then just stacked at every other position on the map. That is a difficult team if they can find a way to gel.
It looks like
Yeah.
second to last pick of the draft will be US Asian for 50 here.
Yeah, again, a player that I didn't expect to go drafted. the way I looked at this league, but looking at the way the solo position is not overly surprising either. I know Pete is extremely good friends with it's Asian. I think that team that Pete seems to be building is very camaraderie based. It's
Mhm.
very much about players who want to play with each other and can play with each other. And we've talked on all broadcast about the value of that rather than maybe just pure mechanical skill. So it's a team that I'm excited to see what happens with.
Yeah, I'm excited to play for the team. A lot of those people are my friends. Not I'm not sad about being on that slightest. Um, and we see the last pick possibly being Satin Hell. Ooh, that is an SDL performer right there. They went in pretty much in playoffs and just made a statement on why I need to be RSL.
Yeah.
Um, with some insane Scylla gameplay and Discordia gameplay. So her getting or them getting picked up in the draft is not a surprise.
Not at all. When you talk about players who are RSL ready, players who are not just good enough to play in the RSL from the SDL, the step up, but also players whose play style will suit it. There are players who can go into the SDL, play incredibly aggressively, and just mechanically diff players that aren't going to be able to do that at the RSL level. Santanel is not that player. She wasn't somebody who just went. Sorry, rather they weren't somebody who was just going to go
Yeah.
in and just dominate lane. It was somebody who played solid Smite, very very
Mhm.
solid Smite, and that's what Eon and his team are going to need. Looking at the rest of that roster, Santanel has a role to play, and I think it's almost the perfect pick to play it. And again, somebody who is very good friends with the people on the team, which is indefinitely valuable when it comes to these drafts.
Yeah, and I agree with you. It looks like that's just going to be us going into the sub rounds here, and even then, like looking at these sub rounds, I would not be surprised if some of these substitutes started to take the places of the people who
No,
were who were supposed to be their starters. I see a lot
yeah.
of great potential here. We see some players who had insane impacts on that last season. When I'm thinking of insane impacts, I'm thinking of Sam Howell. I'm thinking list here. Um, well, Lonkers Honkers is someone that I personally have played with quite a bit. I'm a little surprised
Mhm.
as to his passing through the draft, but when there's so many mid laners, it's a little hard to tell. Um, Let's Play ABC did really well in support role in some private tryouts. A little surprised to see him go. Juicy Jimmy, a strong player from last season, um, one. C Breezy did, he wasn't always on a team, but when he was on one, he was playing really well and playing really solidly. And looks like Meaty Man Link is going to go, in case you didn't know, that is Lonkers Honkers. Um, so he is going to be on that team there. Keep going through Bones 980. I've heard insane things about this dude. I've actually heard one person just make the blatant claim that he would be the best carry here. Um, so
That is a big claim.
so especially with such a stacked roster we have here, um, just going into it. Konino is someone who's a very strong solo laner. One of the ones I thought would be one of the better players in this draft. Just kind of going undrafted here. Raven, one of the players who looked like they were really RSL ready, um, just ready to show up and do all that stuff. He seemed like he could
Hmm.
have won an award in pretty much any role if he had felt like it, but he didn't qualify because he was doing it in all the roles. Um,
Yes.
yeah, those are just some of the players who, Vile Artist still on that draft board. I know a lot of people know that he's SCC now, and weekends are kind of off limits, but
Yeah.
there's still very strong, very strong players still left out on this.
Yeah, I think you're getting down to that stage now, aren't you, where you've got a lot of very, very talented players left. You talk about Violartis, you talk about Jimmy, two people I played with a lot last season. On casual mains, got all the way to RSL finals and looked extremely dominant throughout the regular season. But there may be, that issue with, like, for instance, Vile has SCC now, like you said, Spooky falling down the draft board because he is SCC and has all of that extra time where he just can't play the game anymore. A lot of European players, I think, are expected to be drafted around this stage just because you haven't got the time to play as you guys in America do because of the time difference. there tends to be something with these players that just means that they're worth this pick, but maybe weren't worth spending 500 or 600 on earlier on
Yeah.
purely for logistical reasons, be it sleep schedules, be it they haven't got they've got a bad work schedule. So there's still a lot of just pure talent available at the center of the draft. It's whether or not teams are willing to take that punt on them, and whether or not they're willing to take the I guess risk. But this is when you're mitigating that risk by not really giving a lot of draft capital away to bring somebody in. And I'd expect to see a lot of those names you've just mentioned that go very quickly.
Yeah. Even as I said that, though, a lot of these names are still staying, up on this board here. The last picks of the draft, we'll have to see if people want to capitalize on these picks left over. I'm not sure they will.
No, and I think I wouldn't expect. Sorry, rather I would expect to see a lot of as Let's Play ABC, one of the players you mentioned in your little rundown there. But I'd expect to see a lot of moves made after the draft as well. I think a lot of people will start picking free agents up to fill those sub spots. I think you get a lot of people who, through in-houses and through scrims, start to swap and change their rosters around, as happens every year. And I'd be very surprised if all of these, people who go undrafted are not playing throughout the season. I'd expect to see a lot of them
Yeah.
involved from start to finish.
100% here, and it looks like the last, unless we go back to Action Days here because he passed earlier on, Carmen's Tippo might be the last pick of the Reap Smite League draft here.
Very possibly.
And
Again,
honestly,
these
what a
are
fitting person to end it with.
very much so. And that, this is the benefit of this draft system. You get lots of different strategies. You get lots of people with different opinions on things, and it really shows in the teams. You don't really get 4 or 5 teams who just play Smite the same way. You don't tend to get 4 or 5 uber aggressive teams. You tend to get a really good mix of different players, and that's one of the things I love about the season. One of the things I'm looking forward to, especially, and I can't wait to get into it now.
Oh, I mean, 100% there. Um, I'm just excited to see, what's gonna go on, what's gonna happen here. Because honestly, I have genuinely no clue. I think in my opinion, I see one, um, I see a few people. I see a few people that really kind of got snubbed in this draft here, but so we'll have to see them kind of come in here, and if they stick around, the see them go into the RSL here, just because I think there's some of these players they just should have been picked and weren't.
Yeah, I think that will also put a lot of chips on people's shoulders. I think, and that's a very good thing for a lot of the players at this level. If they have a motivating tool, if they have something to really drive them to prove somebody wrong, they're going to kick that game up and start playing so much better than they were before. So again, I wouldn't be surprised if we saw an MIP or even an MVP that maybe hasn't been involved yet, and somebody that could really rise through the ranks. I think Amish, somebody who wasn't in the league at the beginning of last year, certainly was in that discussion for MVP by the end of it. And it's somebody, that could be another one of those stories, another Cinderella stories where somebody comes in and just plays through the ranks, starts really impacting a team that isn't doing so well. And that's one of the reasons that we love these draft leagues so much, because we really like to see how the teams develop.
Yeah, and here, and it looks like we're not gonna end up going um back to um back to Action Days at the end of the draft here. That will likely 100% here. So, you have any last thoughts or words here?
Not really. The only thing I'd say really is that the teams look, I think, maybe more even than we've seen in the past. I think there are a lot of teams that can really come in here and compete at the very top end, and I wouldn't really expect to see any of the teams just be, you know, an outstander in either direction. I wouldn't really expect to see any unbeaten teams. I probably wouldn't expect to see any teams without wins either, which would be a really refreshing change of pace. And it's something, again, I've said this a lot, but it's something I'm really excited for looking at the next couple of weeks and the start of season 5 of the Reap Smite League.
Yeah, I'm your host, Muffin Man. You're joined by Cryptic, and that's gonna be the end of the 5 draft show. We're excited to see you guys all in the league, all in these league steps. And if you're wondering, where can I find some more content? Well, you can look directly at our new partnership with Bojo's Dojo. They'll be having a excerpt or excerpt on the solo lane tomorrow rundown. So if you're looking for some more content, check that out. Once again, I'm your host, Mudman, joined by Cryptic, and we will see you guys